Can I let you in on a little secret? If you're still manually sending proposals, chasing signatures, or onboarding clients through email ping pong, you are doing way too much. That's why my Dubsado specialist, Kendra, and I created the Dubsado Decoded private podcast series just for bookkeepers like you. It's totally free, it's 7 episodes, and it's in a private feed where we walk you through how to create a seamless automated client experience using Dubsado. We cover how to simplify your onboarding, boost your confidence, and actually impress clients from day one without spending hours on admin. And yep, it's free, private, and bingeable in under a week. Head over to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/Dubsado to get access and stay in the know on when our Dubsado course goes on sale. Again, that's ambitiousbookkeeper.com/Dubsado. You are going to love it. The link is also in the show notes. Hey, and welcome to the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. I'm Serena Shoup, CPA, a mom of 3, and I've been running a virtual bookkeeping business from my home since 2017. You are in the right place if you are a bookkeeper, accountant, or an accounting student, and you believe and know in your heart that your purpose is bigger than sitting in a cubicle. If you're ready to learn some actionable tips and strategies for starting and growing your accounting business, then I hope you stick around. Hey, Jock, welcome back to the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. Yeah. I'm excited to have you on again. I know I've had you on once before, but maybe even twice.
If I think we've talked quite a lot in the past, but it's definitely been once. So that's from my memory too. So yeah, thanks for having me back, Serena. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and a lot has changed in our industry since I first had you on. And so I wanted to have you back on to kind of talk through things that people should be aware of when it comes to insurance and risk and all of that kind of stuff. But first, can you start by telling us who you are, how you help people, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, excited to be back on your podcast, Serena. My name is Jock Wols. I am an insurance professional. So I act as an insurance broker. And so I help clients like bookkeepers, accountants, other professionals, technology companies with their insurance programs. So predominantly we focus on professional liability insurance, also known as E&O insurance, cyber insurance, and this other set of products called management liability. I used to be on the underwriting side. I worked for an insurer for a long time in London and then New York, and then transitioned to the intermediary side, to the broking side. And I forget exactly when we initially kind of connected, but it's got to be maybe 5-6 years ago. So it's been a while, and I like to think I'm pretty ingrained within the bookkeeping community through partnerships like yours and others. So we work with a lot of bookkeepers to help them with their insurance, but also their risk management requirements.
Yeah. I can't believe it's been that long. I do remember having you on the podcast in the very initial, you were one of, the first 20 episodes.
Yeah. What's your episode number up to now?
We're in the 200s now. So
okay.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. And we
should give a lap of honor to all the ones that were in the teens, right? So up into the teens, the early ones.
Yeah, for sure. Ones. So you run a company called Risk Desk, and
yes, sorry, I forgot to mention.
That's okay. I'm just going to make sure people know, and we're going to link all of your information in the show notes. I switched over to using you guys to help me with the insurance side of things several years ago. So walk through kind of, I guess, briefly what that looks like for the newer bookkeeper who is listening and they're like, do I need insurance?
Yeah, no, for sure. And so there's, we try to, I should just start off with, I try to take an education first approach. Obviously, I monetize my relationship with prospective clients through the sale of an insurance policy, but we also want to be seen as a subject matter expert or a resource to, especially your audience and others within this community. So from an insurance perspective, the 3 products I get predominantly asked about are 1, professional liability, which is also called errors and omissions insurance, and that tends to be the number 1 priority by the community. It covers you for your main business risk, which stems from the services that you render to your clients. Then the second product we get interest in is cyber insurance. That has really skyrocketed in terms of the demand, in terms of the need, just in response to what's happening with small businesses over the last 5-6 years, and we'll get into that a little. And then the third product they get asked about is general liability insurance. That tends to be a pretty distant product priority, especially those in startup phase. So there's almost like an inflection point of when someone has interest in that product. It's usually like, hey, they've got an office location, they've got some employees, or they want to also bundle it with some property kind of coverage. So the vast majority of those in startup phase kind of ignore that product. We often kind of recommend, hey, get all these insurance products, but it's not as simple as just buying an insurance product. There's also a fourth product that comes up, which is called workers' compensation insurance. We don't specialize in that. Some states require that you carry that, even if you're a sole, even if you're the only owner or employee of that business, but that comes up periodically too.
What you mentioned a moment ago was cyber insurance. And I've pretty much from the beginning, I'm pretty sure I've always had a cyber policy. But when I switched to working with you, you actually looked at my existing policies and helped me fill the gaps of coverage, because I pretty much just clicked a button when I first started my business. Like, oh, this is what the AICPA recommends for an accounting business. And so I'm just going to buy it. And that was one area I was really impressed with, how you work with people on really understanding their business. And then the fact that I have two businesses essentially with different needs, you were able to help me find policies that made sense for both. And so you sat down and understood my business, what my revenue is, where my risks are, and all these things, and my risk tolerance, which I'm sure you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And helped me find the best program of insurance for what was in my budget.
Yeah, totally.
So
yeah, I was just going to kind of jump in there. And cyber threat, cyber risk grabs a lot of attention based on what's kind of going on. And most weeks you can read something in the press about, hey, this business has suffered a cyber attack, or here's this ransomware, or this school district has suffered this ransomware attack, right? So we see it a lot. What's changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years, maybe 2020, 2018, 19, 20 onwards, is who cyber criminals have been targeting. If you wind back to like 2010, 2015, it was predominantly mid-sized to large organizations that had exposure through the industry that they were part of. So think healthcare, financial services, or the volume of information that they had, which was attractive to cyber criminals. More recently, other threats have become very popular amongst cyber criminals, and they typically kind of fall under the social engineering fraud umbrella. So think of phishing, spear phishing, whaling. There's a couple different iterations of social engineering fraud. And the objective by the cyber criminal, there's a couple different ones, but they basically try to deceive you into taking a certain action. And that can mean wiring money to a fraudulent account, opening up a file that deploys ransomware or some other virus, getting you to log into a fake website that then you give up your user credentials or other sensitive information. And then they either, with wire transfer fraud or ransomware, once the money's gone or your system's locked, pretty much immediately that you've been compromised. But then also as a small business, and this is why it's attractive to cyber criminals targeting the small business community, maybe your cybersecurity safeguards are a little lower. They're not as sophisticated as a mid-sized or large organization, but they can use you as a springboard to attack, think of your clients or vendors or others, to then commit the real scams. So there's quite a bit kind of going on there. And so the cyber insurance policies, and this is the situation that, as a buyer, as a first-time buyer, you see this thing called insurance, and it's a cyber on top of it. And you're like, okay, great, I've got a cyber insurance policy. Unfortunately, the devil is in the details, and what's covered under these cyber insurance policies can vary dramatically from being basic, and I'm being kind there, in terms of very limited cyber attacks would be covered under a very basic kind of solution to a market-leading solution. So think, and really the kind of key giveaways are ransomware, wire transfer fraud, and social engineering fraud. If those three things aren't reflected in that policy, then it's an outdated solution. So, in the eyes of the cyber insurance solution, the cyber attack isn't automatically covered; it has to be specifically referenced, and so that's where. If someone does get tripped up, that's where they can get kind of tripped up, and it's not necessarily the fault of the buyer. You just don't know what to look for. So our approach is we want to work with those insurers, and we work with plenty insurers who offer market-leading cyber insurance policies.
So you mentioned a couple different types of phishing. So
Yeah,
I didn't know that there were so many different types of phishing until recently when I teased this before we hit record. I was like, I have a story.
yeah. Okay, I want
So
to
if
hear it. So,
anyone here is listening to the podcast and you are a subscriber to my email newsletter, I've been putting out a bi-weekly kind of behind the scenes newsletter of just my pure thoughts and ideas that I feel like writing about, pure inspiration. One of the ones that I shared was I was recently targeted through the Gusto partner directory by two different businesses within a day of each other
mhm,
requesting payroll services. And they were like, we're really interested in all the services you have to offer, but first we need payroll set up. Our employees are like, really demanding their pay or whatever. And so like that was red flag number one. It's like the
mhm,
rush of it. And
mhm,
so I put them through my process of like getting to be a client, the proposal, engagement letter, all of that kind of stuff before starting to work with them. And in that process, because of their pushiness, I decided to go and make sure these companies really existed. So I searched them online because they were both very, very similar and they only wanted to communicate via email. They didn't want to hop on a call, which is another huge red flag as an accountant or a bookkeeper. If someone isn't willing to get on a call with you, they are probably not actually looking to, they're not a valid client. Like think of yourself. Would you actually hire someone you've never talked to manage your money? No.
right. Yeah, totally.
um, so I ended up, one of them, I called the number that they had listed on their intake form, and it was someone with very broken English,
Mhm,
and they were driving, and they kind of like, I don't even know how to explain it, but they basically were like, oh, well, I'm not at my desk. I'll have to get back to you later type of thing. And I was like, okay, this is suspicious. And then I looked up that company and the other thing too, is that both of these companies had things that made them actual good, viable potential clients for me. One of them was based in Arizona and the other one was actually in the industry that I work with in my niche. So I reached
is that
out
on
to
your
both of
Gusto profile?
Huh?
Are those metrics, are those data points on your Gusto profile?
Yes. So I reached out to both of those companies directly from the information I found out about them online. One of them I
Mhm,
found on Instagram, DM'd him. They were a musician, an online course creator, and the other one was an insurance agency down in Phoenix here in Arizona. And I called the insurance office, spoke to someone in the office, and I asked them, like, did you guys request payroll services through Gusto? And they were like, no, we already have payroll set up. And I was like, is the agent that you work under, do they have broken English? And they were like, absolutely not. She's very well spoken. And so I was like, okay, so someone has your information and is trying to use it in some regard. The other one that I ended up contacting on Instagram had not already had a Gusto account, and he had never even heard of Gusto. And then he reached back out to me a few days later saying that he had, whatever that scammer was doing, they got to another bookkeeper or someone else and they were able to pull money out of his account. So they set up a fake payroll account with all of his information that they had somehow about his business and were able
with
to,
the musicians?
yes.
What?
Yeah. So they had his business LLC information, his EIN number somehow, and were able to set up a fake payroll company through Gusto and actually, or make it look like it was through Gusto. I'm not sure exactly what ended up happening on his end, but he had reached out to me and said they ended up getting me. If you have any information on them, I would love to have it. And I was like, yeah, you should report them to cybercrime.
It's crazy.
Yeah, the approach that they took, there were very subtle things that were red flags that I'm just a skeptical person to begin with. And that's kind of how we're trained as accountants. But I recognize not everybody in the bookkeeping industry has gone through fraud classes and training like that to become skeptical. And they are really just trying to help people. And they also are in it to get paid. And so someone easily was susceptible to this because it worked. And so one of the things that we talked about before we hit record was there's risk management as far as mitigation and then risk management as far as insurance. So can you talk to the mitigation
Yeah.
piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and they're kind of related, right? So into the insurance part, the risk transfer part is intended to not be a catch-all, but yeah, they kind of work together in a way. So in insurers, they look at risk mitigation in terms of evaluating your risk profile. So if you're thinking about, let's just use something very simple. As a professional, you have agreements, you provide a service to your clients. From a risk management perspective, to outline the agreement between what you're going to provide and what the client's going to accept, you're most likely going to use an engagement letter, or that's kind of the accepted standard these days, right? In that engagement letter, you'll probably outline your payment terms. You're going to outline the scope of services you will provide. Maybe you will even outline the scope of services you don't provide. So that's the mitigation part of it, right? That not only helps you, the engagement letter, and not only helps you enter into an agreement with the client, it also outlines the parameters you're kind of working with. If there's some kind of miscommunication, if your client's like, well, I want you to provide investment advice, and you're saying, well, I'm not going to be providing investment advice, it's clear in my engagement letter. Okay, if they have a misunderstanding, you capture it before you start working. Or if they sue you and say, you failed to provide investment advice, well, actually, I wasn't hired to provide investment advice. So that's kind of the mitigation part that we talk about. And there's lots of processes and procedures that, in terms of time frame, deadlines that you want to meet, use certain software to help you with that, engagement letters. When it comes to cyber risk, and this is an evolving threat to businesses. And so what you were kind of talking about in terms of, I feel like these user profiles on Gusto and QuickBooks and certain associations, that's it's not uncommon. It's not the first time that I've kind of heard about that, right? So for cyber criminals, they look at that as, oh, great, here's some data points that I can kind of lean into and sort of create my own kind of funnel, and then initiate. I mean, in a perverse kind of way, they've got their own kind of marketing funnel, right? Mm-hmm. And then they say, and each tactic, each scam is a little different. But kind of going back to those directories, it provides them with some information. And they say, okay, and then they try to pick on certain, like you said, Arizona, your industry. They try to pick on certain things that lures you, small data points that lures you into a false sense of security. When you get these things, and there's one other one that I've seen recently within these bookkeeping communities, again, linked to clients or cyber criminals trying to initiate the scams, but developing and thinking critically around, okay, what is this prospective client asking me to do is really important. And it starts with education. You talking about, hey, Gusto, scams are coming from there. Doesn't mean every referral is a scam, right? But you want to be sensitive to that. If you see that, your sensors should be on high alert and say, okay, it's come from Gusto, it's come from a directory. Okay, what are they asking me to do? Okay, they only want to communicate via email. Okay, red flag. Doesn't mean it's a scam, right? But okay, I got to be a little more sensitive. They ask me to wire funds. Got to be sensitive around that, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. One other thing and this is, which I haven't experienced it with any of my clients, I've seen it with any of my clients, but someone reaching out and saying, hey, I want to schedule an appointment. Please download my Zoom link or whatever. Please use this video linking tool. And so they embed this link within the communication, the email communication, again, because as you want to have that video communication, that from a risk management perspective, that'll reduce your exposure. So they're kind of picking up on that, and they say, hey, download this. And when you download it, it actually downloads a virus onto your system and it locks you out, and then they gain entry into your system. It's something that's starting that I've seen within the communities. A
Mm-hmm.
couple of people kind of post about over the last maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah.
It hasn't really hit a big wave, but again, you got to think about, what are my processes, what are my procedures, what am I doing, and not deviating from them, because they will try to get you to deviate from your own processes and procedures that you are familiar with, that you trust in yourself, to take a certain action that lures you into that, where you become a victim.
Yeah. I had another similar thing happen to me where someone had probably gotten a hold of access into my trademark attorney's system and gotten access to her email list somehow. And they emailed out an email that looked very, very similar to the emails that she sends out when we have a document to review or whatever. So it all had like her branding, her colors, and it was like the subject was like, there's a correspondence from the trademark office, click here to read it. So anyone who was on her list that has used her to file a trademark got that. And I initially thought it was strange when I saw it, and I was like, she usually will call us. She'll usually call me if she has a notice, or put in the body of the email what the notice was about and then have it attached or whatever. There's usually something slightly different. But my my dumbass clicked the button. Because
That
everything
happens.
looked so legitimate. It even looked like it came from her email. And that's another thing, that always hover over links before you click on them to make sure they're the link that you're expecting. You can inspect the link. There's different strategies. But this one, there was like maybe one letter off of her email address, right? And so it looked real. They'll go to great lengths. They will create an email domain or an alias that looks exactly like where you're expecting things to come from. And clicked the link, and then it prompted me to log in with Gmail, and it looked like a whole, that single sign-on thing.
Yeah, right.
But then it just kept looping, and I was like, okay, I emailed her and I was like, was this legit? And then she was like, no, I have to send a mass email because I'm getting all sorts of emails from people about it. I immediately changed my passwords and everything. But yeah, it was. Oh, hey, Alyssa, what are you doing here?
Well, nothing, just getting really amped up for a session we're doing on September 30th.
Oh, did you come on here to record an ad with me?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Can you give us a little more information about what this session is and why people want to join?
Yeah, the session is called the Advisory Edge, where we're going to be talking about Loom, AI, and next level delivery. It's on Tuesday, September 30th at 11 a.m. Pacific or 2 p.m. Eastern, and you can find it on Zoom once you sign up for the session.
So join me and Alyssa for a live workshop that will completely change the way you deliver reports to your clients. You're going to learn how to elevate your client communication with Loom video reviews and explore high-level ways AI can support your process, giving clients a taste of advisory while creating natural opportunities to upsell them into ongoing services.
From this 90-minute workshop, you'll walk away with clear examples, proven frameworks, and practical strategies that you can use on your clients right away, so you can deepen the client relationships and confidently increase your fees. Now, Serena, where can people go to sign up for the session, and how much is it?
Head over to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/advisory, and it's only $97. And there will be a replay. So even if you can't attend live, make sure you sign up, and we'll see you there.
Can't wait.
So there is these phishing scams can vary in sophistication. So what you were talking about in terms of, hey, cybercriminal sets up a new domain name, it's got an additional L or additional I in the in that domain. It's a mass marketed email to a certain audience where user lists or some kind of compromise or some information, Gusto information, can help refine and help the cyber criminals target that audience. But there's also so that's one type of scam, and that's been obviously around for decades, right, or a while. The other more sophisticated scam is if that cyber criminal breaches a system. And basically, with that attorney, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but this is what we've seen with some of our bookkeeping clients, the cyber criminal basically takes over the email or has access to that email and then actually launches the cyber attack from that email domain. So it is the actual legit email.
Right. Okay. So maybe that is what happened.
Yes. And so there's a couple different, I got something similar. This was earlier this year. Someone like, hey, Jock, here, it was one of my bookkeeper clients. She sent this, hey, please open this Dropbox file. And I was like, that's a little strange. So I called her.
To the cyber expert.
Yeah, I was like, it's like, let's see what's going on here. So I called her within that morning, and she's like, yeah, something happened. So we basically notified the cyber insurer, and pretty quickly, what happened was she gave up her user credentials somehow. Cyber criminals got in there, and then they slowly tried to take over the system and the environment that you operate in. And so that was resolved, fortunately, relatively quickly for her. But then also another scam that we've seen, again, similar kind of playbook where cyber criminal got into a bookkeeper's client's domain email, and they sat in that email or in that environment for 2 months or so, identified that the bookkeeper was one of the trusted partners, understood that they process funds on behalf of the client, knew that the client, the business owner, predominantly emailed in terms of correspondence. So they basically set this thing up where they said, hey, here's this vendor. We need to pay this vendor 50 grand or whatever it was. And let's first pay the 5 grand. And they piggybacked off an existing email chain between the bookkeeper and the business owner, so again, it looks legit. It did come from the business owner's email.
Wow.
And they said, hey, our bank balance is X, let's just first pay the 5 grand. And then once we have this incoming transaction, we'll send the remaining 45 grand or 40 grand, whatever it was. So again, came from the business owner, cyber criminal, but from the business owner's email. Business owner predominantly communicated via email. They piggybacked off an existing email thread. They said, here's our bank balance, so it's low. So piggybacking all these like little data points that basically lure you into this false sense of security. And yeah, we got 50 grand out of that. So, you just got to be, with wire transfer fraud, there's one thing, if there's one takeaway out of today's podcast, if you get tasked to wire funds, comes electronically, that should be your first sort of, your senses should be on alert. But then if it's a new bank account, so it's a new vendor, the business had never wired funds to that, or they say, hey, I'm an employee, I've got a new bank account, you got to pick up the phone and call. Yeah. You have to pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
That is the most effective way to kind of manage that risk.
Which is just our personality type as bookkeepers. A lot of us are introverted, and we love that everything happens virtually and that we don't have to be on the phone and everything is asynchronous. I like, my body tightens up when my phone rings. I do not like answering the phone. I don't like making calls. I don't even like calling my dentist to reschedule an appointment. So they're really preying on our personality type here.
Well, okay, so here's the value in picking up the phone and calling your client in terms of saying, hey, I just want to verify this. You actually elevate your level of trust with that client. So you get something or you should get something in return in terms of like, hey, they were looking out for me in my bed. Yeah, even if they confirm that, hey, it's legitimate, go ahead. Yeah. They know that you're looking out for their best interests. So there is a value to you in terms of like just doing that extroverted action of picking up the phone and calling the client, and the client can then say, and if it's not, then they're like, well, you got our back, you know what you're doing. And so that is either you can prevent something from happening, or you can reassure them that you're the right professional to work for them. So there is value in that you can't really attach. You're not getting paid for that, but you get there's an inferred kind of reward towards that. So
Yeah,
think of it from that perspective. That's
absolutely.
and it not only protects you, but it also protects your clients. So
What if somebody is victim to something like this? I know all of our listeners are now going to be very high on alert with every little thing. You're going to be picking up the phone and calling your client,
yeah.
all the things, and not clicking on any links unless you asked for the link. But what is someone supposed to do if something like this happens and they do have a cyber insurance policy, or maybe they don't even, but like, what are the steps someone should take?
So when it comes to cyber threats, speed to respond, it matters a lot. And so with that breach that I was talking about, where with that Dropbox file or that request that I got, had a very similar situation a couple months later. Similar kind of playbook, system got taken over, and unfortunately, that particular individual just took longer to respond. Initially, they tried to handle it themselves with someone, an IT connection that they had locally. They thought they resolved it, didn't get resolved a month, and then they had a cyber insurance policy. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks later, maybe even 6 weeks later, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got this issue," and that thing has been dragging on for almost 4 months now. It's finally getting to this point where it's getting resolved. So, if you would have taken action immediately, either with the insurer or with a qualified IT professional, you can, I mean, you can resolve it and contain it much more. Along those 4 months, she lost most of her clients. She's basically has to restart from scratch. It's a very difficult kind of situation. And by default, we kind of recommend get a cyber insurance policy, right? But there's also other things beyond the insurance policy, from a risk management perspective, processes and procedures, what you're clicking on. Education is really helpful. Sitting and listening to podcasts like this, any content around cyber threats, cyber risk can be helpful. If you know that, hey, Gusto's great, but if I get a referral from the directory, I'll think a little more critical, or hopefully you'll think a little more critically around that because you heard it on your podcast, right?
Yeah.
And so learning from others in the community can be really helpful. When it comes to wire transfer fraud, number one thing you want to do is have that verification process in place. No exceptions, zero exceptions. I've seen things where someone's made an exception and smart individual, they just get nailed.
Yeah.
So don't make any exceptions. Don't bend your own rules. And if the client doesn't like it, either try to explain it to them or just in a way that you're looking out for their best interests because you know what the exposure is to your business. In a way, it's an exposure to their business too. And then maybe they're just not a good client. So the client selection does, in quality of clients, as we all know, you have good clients and you've got bad clients. And it depends also where you are with your business. Sometimes you just have to take on those bad clients, but if you can let someone go if they're not a good fit for you, then sometimes you have to make that difficult decision. Let me just talk about wire transfer fraud, because right now in the cyber insurance market, there is a delineation, and it's of what is covered under the funds transfer fraud coverage part. And so the best way to kind of think about it is you will be covered for the loss of your own funds. You will not be covered for the loss of funds beyond your control. So it's a problem for professionals like bookkeepers, lawyers, tax professionals, accountants, real estate agents, where you're part of your client's environment and you may be privy to those transactions that are flowing through a particular deal or through your client's accounts. If you get tricked into wiring your client's funds to a fraudulent account, the insurer is going to say, that's not us. It should be the other party's insurance policy that needs to respond.
So effectively, we want our clients to also have cyber insurance.
Yeah, potentially. So, I mean, that's one part of it. So
And also maybe don't manage client funds if you can avoid that. Like we don't do AP or anything. We don't manage any client. We only have view-only access to bank accounts. So that's probably the best way you can protect yourself. But I do understand that some bookkeepers are very embedded in their clients, or if you're an in-house bookkeeper for a company and you're actually cutting checks and you have control over the bank account.
Yeah, and again, my role is not here to tell you how to run your business or what you should or shouldn't be doing. You make business decisions, but this is like a data point that you can kind of consider. So if you think you're covered by a cyber insurance policy, you won't be. The cyber insurance market is, it took a U-turn or 180 in 2021, 22. Cyber insurance market was underwater. So that was one of the responses by cyber insurers that remained in the marketplace, where they say, hey, we've got to draw a line in the sand, which in a way is like, well, if it's such a problematic area, then obviously clients or policyholders need that coverage part, right? So that's on the flip side. But we're getting to a point where it's softening up a little. So cyber insurers are starting to make money again. We want our insurers to be profitable, because that means the policies will be broader, hopefully also cheaper. So that's what we want to see from our cyber insurers. But we're seeing certain, with lawyers, for example, a couple of our preferred insurers have said, hey, funds in escrow will be deemed as funds under your control, right? Not necessarily your client's bank accounts, but if there's funds in escrow, okay, that's covered under these policies. So we're slowly moving back towards that piece. For those businesses that, in general, it's like there's almost like an inflection point, $500,000 to $2 million in revenues. Those practices start looking at commercial crime policies, which predominantly cover a business for employee theft or dishonesty. They also have a broad commercial crime policy, also has this social engineering fraud coverage part, which does extend beyond for funds beyond your control. So, depending where you are with your business and what your risk tolerance is, that is something that a growing business or a business of a certain size can consider too.
Perfect. That's good to know, because wherever we can help our clients do a little better in their business, a lot of our clients, I know for myself, I mean, we do the bookkeeping, so I see the transactions that come in for our clients, and a lot of our clients don't have cyber insurance. So they don't think they need it, I guess, even though they're doing consulting or course creation, and they don't, there's not like a connection made. So
similar how I say, I'm not an IT consultant. I don't weigh in on like telling you, hey, these are your best practices from an IT perspective. But what I do is try to point certain things that we learn from our insurers, where they say, hey, you need to pick up the phone, right? Or you back up your information, because no, it doesn't prevent a cyber attack, but it can help put you in a better position if you do suffer a cyber attack, right? All that stuff. So it's similar how we kind of point that out, you're a trusted professional amongst your clients. They will listen to you. And if you make observations, and you're obviously not going to recommend, you need to do this with your business, or you need to, unless you're hired to provide some consulting advice, but you also, you can point them in the right direction too. Again, drawing from what you know with your overall kind of all your clients, you can say, hey, I see this and this with certain clients, you may want to consider look into this and that, right? So
yeah, that reminds me, you said something about backing up information, and I know this is one of those areas where, when cloud computing was starting to become a thing, this was very concerning for a lot of people moving to the cloud. And I feel like we've adopted the cloud so well that I don't know that people are necessarily thinking about this as a risk, but anymore, just being focused on different things. But one of the things that I carry the burden and the cost of for our clients when they work with us is I pay for a backup service to pull all the data from Zero, where we're doing their bookkeeping, and back it up on a weekly basis. And sometimes I look at that expense that hits every month, and I'm just like, ugh.
Is it necessary? Can I cut the cost there?
But at the same time, like, that peace of mind, whether my client cares or not, if something were to happen and someone were to enter our accounting system through one of me or my team and shut everything down, take over our Zero account, I at least know I have all the work that we've already done backed up if we have to recreate it. Yes, we have PDF bank statements as well, but I would rather not recreate years and years worth of bookkeeping information from a PDF.
What IT professionals kind of recommend is this sort of like 3-2-1 backup strategy, which means, hey, have three sources of your data in two different formats. One of them is offline. Sounds sort of great, I guess, but at the same time, it's like, well, what's the resource involved with that? And is it practical for me as my business, as a solo bookkeeper is just starting out? So you got to think about how you can reinvent the backup strategy in terms of saying, okay, where's information? Where's my own information? Where's my client's information? Okay, if it's all in the heart of my hard drive, okay, if the computer's gone, forget a cyber attack. If it's gone, what do I do next, right? Oh, I've got a bit of a problem. Okay, great. I'll put it in the cloud. I'll use Dropbox or Google Suite or Google Docs, whatever it is, or QuickBooks or the Keep app or whatever it is. I'll put it up there. Okay, great. It's in there. So if my hardware is gone, I can just reconnect it. Okay, well, what if QuickBooks just all of a sudden shuts down? Then you say, okay, well, where can I get the information from? Yeah, sure, QuickBooks will probably have it backed up, but what's the speed to kind of get that information? Or what if Dropbox gets compromised and held hostage by a cyber criminal, right? Like your Dropbox account. Then, okay, if you've got it backed up in a different kind of backed up from those software tools, okay, great. Then you've got options, right? And again, it's that initial kind of resource involved for you to kind of establish that strategy and put this and pay a fee to get that stuff backed up, or the hardware for the external hard drive. But then when it comes to that breaking point, or when you're faced with that decision, I mean, the cost of having to go back a month or 2 months, whatever it is going to be probably far outweigh what your monthly expenses on that backup solution. So think about it from that perspective. Hey, and you sort of stress test that. Again, cyber insurers aren't saying you have to have this 3-2-1 backup strategy, but you do what's best for you and your business.
Yeah. Back in the day when I worked at a CPA firm where we were moving everything to paperless, so digital, but still on a local network. Someone was responsible for taking that backup disk off of the site every weekend.
Yeah.
Something like that.
No, those are the days.
Yeah. So kind of like think of what is your strategy for managing things as you have it now. Like when I think through our process, my issue is that like actually nothing is on our desktops. Everything is on the cloud. We use Google Drive or Workspace business version. So all of our client files are digital there. We have Xero and we have HubDoc. So we have multiple places where all the receipts are saved. We back up HubDoc onto Google Drive. But then that other piece is the Xero file. And that's where it's important to have that third party. It's actually fairly affordable, even though I was like, oh, this expense. It's like $100 a month for all of our clients. It's like the per client fee is hardly anything in comparison to the peace of mind that it gives us. But to what you're saying is like, I get an email every month, I think, of like a reminder of like your subscription is renewed. You can go in and download your backups. But like I've only ever downloaded a backup from there like once. When I had a client close her business and I was removing her Xero file, I just saved all the backup files and canceled her subscription, because that's also something we have to do. When you cancel your Xero subscription, you lose access completely. It's a little different than QuickBooks. They don't keep it for a year or whatever. That's a hole in my process of like, okay, so maybe once a month we should go in and download, at the very least, download all those backup files to an external hard drive, perhaps.
Yeah. And again, the risk, the likelihood of the Xero being compromised or something happens to you and the backup provider having an issue, the likelihood that both events would happen at the same time is probably low. So that third piece is, I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not an IT consultant, but you think about it. Okay, what's the cost? What's the process? And then you manage each one of these risk mitigation strategies or these processes and procedures provide value, but they're not a resource drain, but there's resource involved with that you have to kind of give up, right? And so again, you make a decision that's best for you and your business, and often it's also a function of size and scale. At what size are you? At what scale are you? Do you have employees? again, kind of going back to the cyber insurance, the exposure piece. If you're a startup bookkeeper about to sign your first client, your points of exposure are relatively low, meaning you've got your hard you've got your laptop, you've got QuickBooks, you maybe use one or two software packages, you've got one client, maybe two clients, one email address, no employees, right? As you kind of grow, every additional client, every additional employee, every additional software tool you use represents an opportunity for a cyber criminal to kind of launch their attack, right? So that increases. And so as you kind of grow, the exposure increases. And so you try to think about, okay, well, at what point am I with my business and what do I need to address? I like to say, as part of the insurance process, the application process, revisit your cyber risk management isn't going to be your number one priority. Servicing your clients and winning new clients is going to be your number one priority, right? But keep it as an ongoing initiative. And that insurance application process, even if you don't buy cyber insurance, think about it. Okay, what have I done up in this last year? What's changed? What I need, what should I, okay, I heard about backing up information. I've got everything on my hard drive. Okay, maybe now's the time to kind of start thinking about it. Just keep that as an ongoing initiative. And especially if you plugged into the bookkeeping community, you listen to the ambitious bookkeeper, and you hear people talk about certain things, what the guests are articulating, keep that going. Like I said, you don't have to do everything now, but keep it in the back of your mind.
Yeah. If you could give people like a couple really simple ways that they can mitigate risk, whether or not they have the insurance policy, what would you say are the top couple things that someone should be doing?
Call when you get a request to transfer funds. I mean, every month I get a call from someone, an existing client or new prospect, who said, I've got this issue. And it is just not slowing down. So, like I said, if there's one takeaway from this discussion, is like, if you get a request to transfer funds, and I know most of you will say, hey, I'm not doing AP or anything like that, but even any changes to bank account information in a payroll system or whatever, if it's a new bank account, pick up the phone and call. The other thing in terms of mitigating risk, so from an E&O perspective, from a professional liability perspective, we already talked about engagement letters, but that is when a claim does get notified to the insurance company, and one of my clients comes to me and says, hey, we messed this up, I need help. We notify the insurer. First thing that claims adjuster will say is like, hey, let me take some information. Let me understand what the agreement was between your business and your client, and what are the allegations made against you, right? And so they kind of, because that will form a strong part of the defense. Like I said, if someone accuses you of, usually plaintiff attorneys like to chuck a lot of things in there. And if they kind of try to open it up beyond just bookkeeping and say, hey, financial advice, you should have acted as an accountant, and you're pretty clear in your engagement with a client that you're only providing bookkeeping or only certain scope of services, forms a strong basis of a strong defense. That's kind of the foundation of what the claims adjuster and the outside counsel, the hired attorney, will formulate their defense around. And then the other thing, which you sort of kind of touched upon, is good clients from bad clients. It's not a risk management strategy, but it's, I think, was it someone once, I forget his name, the General Electric manager. My God. But he basically said, hey, we need to cull the bottom 10% of all employees, all clients every single year. Basically meaning that the bottom 10%, the resource drain on that business was outweighed what top 90% kind of created. And so you sort of kind of go through, and usually the bad clients fall within that bottom 10%. So if you're in a position to sort of think about, hey, who are my good clients, who are my bad clients, who are my problematic clients, and if you can get rid of some of the problematic clients, and sometimes they pay more, but it's a function of putting yourself, you asked about processes and procedures. If you think about it and you say, hey, okay, this is a bad client, but I'm getting compensated well and it's worth my time, then okay, great. If you feel like it's not, then you can sort of work towards, just make more of a deliberate decision in servicing those bad clients.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, like, I could probably go on all day and and ask you more and more questions. A couple of my tips would be make sure you're using two-factor authentication in case your passwords are compromised, and make sure your team is also using it. After this, I'm going to go and double check my Zero file to make sure all of my team has 2FA turned
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
um,
Sorry.
and yeah,
This is so much. So.
yeah. And just continue to stay aware of the tactics that are happening and really evaluate all of your systems and where your risks might be. I know a lot of bookkeepers come to me and they're more stressed about doing something wrong and messing up with a client than any of these other things. So I think the risk is higher with cybercrime than it is that you're going to mess up something with your clients unless you accidentally do wire fraud.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
if you have a good heart and you have your engagement letter in place. That was one question I was going to ask is, have you come across anyone where they'd had it delineated, outlined in their engagement letter that they were specifically not providing a certain service, but they did, and then something fell apart because they went outside of what they actually agreed upon?
Yes, I mean, scope creep does happen. I mean, I'm sure often, I don't know how it is with your clients, Serena, but I do see communication in the groups where someone's like, oh, they're trying to get me to do this and that. So that kind of goes beyond the engagement letter. So, I mean, again, it's, if you provide a service in the E&O policies, good and E&O policies, they won't have an exclusion relating or requiring you to use an engagement letter. So we want that to be absent, and that's deliberate, and it's not a bad thing. So use of engagement letters should be viewed as a risk management function, and there should be a credit as part of the pricing process applied rather than an exclusion in the policy. So meaning that, hey, if you use engagement letters, you get a premium discount, or it's part of the pricing calculation. If you don't, you get kind of dinged for that. And so that should be the difference versus, hey, if you don't use one, you don't get covered, right? We still want the client or the policyholder to be covered for that. So if there's scope creep, again, it sort of has to fall within the definition of professional services, that those services are covered under that policy. And if it's a broad policy, it shouldn't be an issue with it. Again, if you deviate from bookkeeping to legal services, that's a problem, right? But if you provide some advisory type of services and it's a broader policy, an accountant's professional liability policy, that won't not providing coverage interpretation, but that should be fine, right? So yeah, I mean, but you also want to think, well, what have I initially kind of agreed to with my client? Why they're asking this? Am I comfortable doing that? And then again, it becomes a business decision.
Right. Yeah, the thing that comes to mind with that is I very clearly don't offer tax or tax advice or anything like that. But I always have clients that are like, is it better to do this versus that tax wise? And it's like, I hate to always default to talk to your tax preparer, but this is your excuse if you're one of those people listening to say that. So you can say, well, if it were me, I would do this, but you need to talk to your tax provider or whatever, or don't even give what you would do personally. It's because if you don't want to cross that line of giving tax advice, you can just keep your mouth shut and say, you need to talk to your tax provider.
Yeah. I mean, I would, if you do provide tax advice and you have a broader policy that covers, and we can talk more about this, but so similar how you have an engagement letter that outlines the scope of services that you provide to your clients, insurance policy works in the same kind of way, where it says, hey, you will be covered for these and these services. And so an accountant's professional liability policy is broader because it would cover you for any accounting related services. So if it's a broad policy form with a broad definition of professional services, if you do provide tax, you should be covered under that broader policy, right? And so if someone comes back and said, well, you said I would do this and I did that and I didn't check with my tax professional, then you still want that policy to be covered, to cover you for legal expenses, right? And then you can fight it, or the lawyers can kind of fight it out. If it's a more restricted policy and then the insurer says, well, you should have told us that you're providing tax advice, then it can become more problematic. But yeah, I mean, your point's also like, hey, what are my boundaries and what am I providing to the clients. So again, like I said, it becomes a business decision. You just need to think about what your exposures are, your risks are, and yeah, we'll bend the rules a little here or there. So, and it just happens.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? We didn't even talk about AI. So
I
maybe
know.
that's
I just realized that.
chat for another
Part
another
two
time.
coming.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So
yeah, thank you so much for coming on here again to chat about all of this. If someone is shopping for insurance or they already have insurance and they're not sure they have the right coverage, where can they get a hold of you to have you help them?
yeah, so thanks for having me, Serena. Much appreciated. Hopefully, it's been a pretty fun discussion, as fun as insurance can be. Yeah, they can reach out to me at probably the best is email, Jock, which is JOCK.Wols, WOLS, at myriskdesk.com.
Perfect.
So,
And we will have that in the show notes.
all right, cool. Yeah, and I can, if you want, we can also plug my calendar invites in there if that's helpful. I don't know. I can't.
I mean, how many calls do you want?
Well, the calendar hopefully will manage that a little. So.
All right. Well, thank you again so
Cool.
much for coming on here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Serena.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who helps make this podcast possible. Content and interviews are produced by me, Serena Shu. Our intro and outro music is written and performed by my brother, Ian Gilliam. Editing is also by Ian using his awesome sound engineering skills along with Descript software. Hosting and publishing is by Buzzsprout, and you can check out the show notes for links to all of these amazing resources and resources mentioned in the episode.
Be ambitious.
Hey, bookkeeper friend, ever wish you could binge only the podcast episodes you need right now? Whether you're diving into advisory work, looking for quick Q&A wins, or craving a little student spotlight inspiration, I've gotcha. We've curated themed Spotify playlists for the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast, so you can skip the scroll and get straight to what matters. Tap into strategy sessions, leadership gems, and more at ambitiousbookkeeper.com/Spotify. Pop in your earbuds and hit play on your next big move.